Atlantis, the Lost Continent, presented by Radio Canada International. This is the final program in our series on Atlantis, which was created, researched, and produced by Robert Zend. In this program, A Theory of Catastrophes.
Once upon a time, in a tiny little village on the eastern ocean shore, lived a fisherman named Okusaki with his young wife and 3 little children. They were very, very poor. While her husband was out on the sea fishing, Aiko went to the market day by day and sold the catch of the previous day. Yet the money she made, no matter how much her husband caught, was hardly enough to pay the rent and satisfy their frugal needs. One afternoon, while Okusaki rode the quiet waves with his fishing boat, suddenly, without any previous sign, black clouds gathered overhead. Fast winds began to blow, and before he noticed, the boat dashed away from the land so quickly that he couldn't even see the rooftops of his village. Soon the night descended, but Okusaki wasn't afraid that he'd be lost, for the sea and the sky and the sun, moon, and stars had been his friends for a long time, and he knew that with their help, he would find his way home again. So despite the raging storm and the black night, he fell peacefully asleep in the bottom of his boat, wrapping himself in the canvas of its sails. Next morning, when he awoke, the sun shone gloriously, and the boat was aground on the beach of an island. Okusaki got out of his boat, walked around the island, and he found it beautiful. Green grass covered its soil. Young forests grew on the tender slopes of its central hill, and colorful flowers scented all the fields. Okusaki raised the mast, stretched out the white sail, and harnessing the light breeze, sped home on the back of the whispering waves. Aiko, with the 3 children and some of their friends, had been waiting for him on the shores since sunrise, first sobbing and wailing in the dimness of the dawn, but then jumping and dancing and exulting as a white dot appeared on the horizon and grew bigger and bigger. After kissing and hugging his family and friends, Okusaki told them of how the unpredictable gods of the firmament blew his boat far away from the land, beyond the horizon, to show him that magic island. The next day they all sailed together to see the place and decided that they would make it their new home. And in the next few years, more families followed Okusaki and Aiko and their friends, building more and more wooden houses on the slopes of the hill above the fragrant meadows. In the mythologies of the eastern Pacific Islands, there is a word for a sea monster whose size, compared to the biggest whale, is that of the mammoth compared to that of the elephant. It is said that only a few such monsters are left from a previous world age, when all the living creatures had much longer lives than in our age. Gundragandra is the name of this fish. It lives for 800 to 1,000 years, spends most of its time in the farthest depths of the ocean, and likes to crawl in the mud of the bottom. But from time to time, it comes up from the deep to fill its lungs with air and to sleep for 30 to 40 years. As it floats serenely during these sleeping periods, the wind blows seeds of flowers and trees onto its mud-covered back, which in a few years come to look uncannily like a real island. Such a primeval monster was the one on which Okusaki and his friends settled and lived for years in happiness and wealth. But one morning, when the men had just prepared their boats, and the women had just cooked breakfast, and the children had just dressed for school, the Gundragandra, in the last minutes of a dream, and feeling a strange itching on its back, awoke. It shook its gigantic body, filled its lungs with air, and turning over, dived, cheerfully somersaulting back into the dark depths of the ocean, taking with it the lives of Okusaki and Aiko, and their children, and their friends, and their homes, and their gardens, and their boats, and their richness, and their happiness, and their hopes.
Robert Zinn's short story is only one illustration of the suddenness with which the catastrophe overwhelmed mankind and swallowed an entire civilization with all its hopes and achievements. Stories of the cataclysm are myriad. They suffuse all the world's mythologies. Also numerous are the scientific theories of what actually brought on the disaster. We asked the world's leading Atlantologist, Egerton Sykes, to sort out the possibilities.
The first possibility is this. In the year 10,000 BC, approximately, a meteorite, which had various names, passed close to the Earth, split up into fragments, and one large portion dropped in to the Atlantic Ocean just off the east coast of America, probably centered roughly near Bermuda, leaving a very large crater of about 2,000 miles diameter. That in itself would have been quite sufficient to have put down Atlantis. And geologically, the traces of the crater formed by this and by smaller portions of the meteorite as it broke up are to be found all over the place. There are, I think, 1,400 craters along the American coast known as the Carolina Bays, not very large, up to about a quarter mile in diameter, which are related to this disaster. This, I may say, was the basic cause of the story of the Bermuda Triangle, which has been grossly exaggerated and seems to have lost all touch with the reality of the actual events that occurred. Now, the second possibility is that we were struck by a comet. The head of a comet could be the same size as that of a small asteroid, say 2 or 3 miles in diameter, and would be heavy enough to cause just as much damage as the other celestial visitor. Professor Michael Kamiensky, the world's most distinguished authority on the Comet Halley and Comet Wolf, which was named Comet Wolf Kamiensky after him, postulated that about BC 10,000 it was possible that Comet Halley had lost its head in a collision with the Earth, and it had to go on ever since without its material head. That is quite a possibility, and from the point of view of an onlooker would have appeared very much the same. The third is that envisaged by the Herbiger theory. Hans Herbiger, who put out his theory in 1913, who died in 1931, was an Austrian engineer who worked out a cosmological system based on his engineering knowledge and experience. One of the points he put forward was that in 10,000 BC, our present moon, which was at that time a small planet or planetoid between ourselves and Mars, got too close to the Earth and was picked up by the Earth's gravitational field as a companion. In the process, most of the outer covering of the moon, that's its topsoil and